Sergeant Ava Moreno's boots felt heavy against the cold airport tiles, a weight she had grown accustomed to after countless months of trudging through unforgiving terrains. The sound of announcements echoed through the terminal, blending with the excited chatter of families and the occasional shrill beep of departing flights. For Ava, every step was one closer to home, to the life she had placed on pause when duty called. She could almost feel the embrace of her mother, the familiar scent of her grandmother's cooking, and the warmth of her own bed. After a year of sandstorms, relentless heat, and constant vigilance, this airport, with all its chaos, was the first taste of normalcy she had allowed herself. She had done this before, left, returned, left again. But this time, the deployment had felt longer, the days more grueling. She had missed holidays, birthdays, and the little moments that made life feel whole. As she approached the check-in counter, she fumbled for her ticket. Her uniform, though neatly pressed, still bore the faint marks of desert dust, a stubborn reminder of where she had been. The attendant, a young woman with a tired smile, took Ava's ticket and glanced up, noticing the fatigues. Her expression softened. "Thank you for your service," the attendant said, typing away on her keyboard. "Looks like you've been upgraded to first class. Enjoy your flight." Ava blinked, taken aback. She was used to long waits, cramped seats, and the hum of engines lulling her into restless sleep. First class was uncharted territory. She nodded, managing a small smile. "Thank you. I appreciate it." As she walked toward the gate, Ava couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and trepidation. She was looking forward to the comfort, but was also aware of the attention her uniform often drew, sometimes positive, sometimes not. For now, she allowed herself a rare moment of luxury, hoping it would be a gentle transition back into the world she had missed. Upon boarding, Ava found her seat near the front, the leather cushion plush and welcoming. She stowed her gear overhead, taking a moment to breathe deeply. For the first time in months, she could relax without feeling the constant itch of danger on her skin. She closed her eyes, savoring the calm, until the murmurs of boarding passengers pulled her back. Among them was a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit, his cologne sharp and his presence commanding. He strode down the aisle, glancing at seat numbers with the casual air of someone accustomed to getting his way. Marcus Thompson was a frequent flyer, the kind of man who didn't have to check his ticket to know he belonged in first class. He was used to quick upgrades, priority boarding, and the unspoken perks of success. He scanned the rows until his eyes landed on Ava, her uniform unmistakable among the business suits and polished travelers. His brow furrowed, and he paused, staring at her with a mix of confusion and disdain. Marcus prided himself on his ability to read people, and in his mind, first class was no place for anyone who hadn't earned it in the corporate trenches. He stopped beside her seat, his gaze lingering. Ava sensed his presence before she saw him, her instincts sharpened by months of hyper-awareness. She looked up, meeting his eyes with a guarded expression. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice clipped. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Ava blinked, thrown by the unexpected confrontation. She checked her boarding pass, then looked back at him, unfazed. "Yes, I'm in the right seat." Marcus's eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "This is first class." Ava nodded. "I'm aware." For a moment, there was silence. Ava hoped that would be the end of it, but Marcus was not one to let things go. He glanced around as if expecting someone to intervene, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I just don't think it's right for soldiers to get upgrades like this. It's unfair to paying customers." Ava felt her cheeks flush, a mix of embarrassment and anger bubbling inside her. She had faced worse confrontations, but this one stung in a different way. She thought of the sacrifices she and her fellow soldiers made daily, the grueling conditions, the missed moments, and the ever-present danger. She had never asked for recognition, only respect. And here, on what should have been a peaceful journey home, she was being challenged for occupying a seat she hadn't even requested. Keeping her voice steady, Ava replied, "I didn't ask for this upgrade. It was given to me." Marcus shrugged, unimpressed. "Still doesn't seem fair." Ava's jaw tightened. She had been trained to maintain composure in the face of adversity, But it was harder now, out of uniformed ranks and far from the battlefield. She had expected challenges on deployment, not on a flight home. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. She was too tired to argue, too weary to explain. Instead, she turned away, focusing on the view outside the window, the city lights twinkling against the darkening sky. Marcus returned to his seat, still fuming. He couldn't shake the feeling of being slighted, and his irritation simmered. The flight attendants began their safety demonstrations, but Marcus barely paid attention, his thoughts consumed by his perceived injustice. Ava, on the other hand, tried to steady her breathing, replaying the encounter in her mind. She had faced judgment before, both in and out of uniform, but this felt different, more personal. The words lingered, echoing in the quiet of her thoughts. As the plane ascended, Ava closed her eyes, trying to find solace in the gentle hum of the engines. But her mind drifted back to moments of prejudice she had faced over the years, moments that had shaped her resolve. She remembered being the only girl at boot camp, fighting twice as hard to prove she belonged. She remembered the skepticism of peers, the dismissive looks, and the snide comments that followed her from base to battlefield. And she remembered her first deployment, the fear and courage interwoven in every decision, every step. Ava knew that the uniform she wore was both a shield and a target. It represented service and sacrifice, but it also invited scrutiny. To some, like Marcus, it was a symbol of unearned privilege. To others, it was a reminder of wars fought far from home, wars they did not support. Ava had long since accepted that she could not change the minds of everyone she encountered, but today, on this flight, she felt compelled to try. Determined not to let Marcus's behavior define her journey, Ava reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook. She had always found comfort in writing, in putting thoughts to paper when words failed her. She began to write, each sentence a release of the tension that had coiled within her. She wrote about her deployment, about the soldiers who had become family, about the moments of fear and hope that defined her service. And then she wrote to Marcus. "Dear Marcus," she began, her pen moving steadily across the page. "You don't know me, and I don't know you. But today, I felt your judgment, and it reminded me of the many times I've been judged before. I've spent the last year away from home, away from my family, serving in places you may never have to see. I don't expect you to understand my experiences, but I hope you can find it in yourself to see me as more than just a uniform. I am a person, just like you, trying to make sense of this world." Ava continued, sharing her hopes for a kinder, more understanding world. She didn't write to chastise Marcus, but to reach out, to bridge the gap between them with words. When she finished, she folded the note neatly and handed it to a passing flight attendant, asking her to deliver it to Marcus. The attendant hesitated but nodded, slipping the note into Marcus's hand a few minutes later. Marcus unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the handwritten words. As he read, his expression shifted from annoyance to contemplation. He had never considered the person behind the uniform, never thought about the sacrifices that went unnoticed. For Marcus, success had always been measured in tangible achievements, business deals, financial gains, visible rewards. But Ava's words painted a different picture, one of quiet resilience and unspoken struggles. By the time he reached the end of the note, Marcus felt a pang of guilt, a realization that he had let his assumptions cloud his judgment. The rest of the flight passed in relative silence. Ava stared out the window, lost in her own thoughts, while Marcus sat quietly, the note resting on his lap. When the plane finally touched down, passengers began to gather their belongings, eager to disembark. Ava stood, reaching for her bag, when she felt a presence beside her. She turned to see Marcus, his expression softened, his demeanor different. "Sergeant Moreno," Marcus began, his voice quieter than before. "I wanted to apologize. I was out of line. Your note. It made me realize how little I understand about what people like you go through. I'm sorry." Ava looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his eyes. For a moment, the tension between them dissolved, replaced by a shared sense of humanity. "Thank you," she said simply. "I appreciate that." Marcus nodded, his gaze lingering on Ava's face. "I think," I think we all need to do better. To see each other as people, not just labels. Ava smiled, a genuine, tired smile that spoke of gratitude and understanding. We all have our battles, she said. But moments like this, when we can connect, even briefly, those are the ones that matter. As they walked off the plane, Ava felt lighter. She knew that not every encounter would end in reconciliation, but today, she had made a difference, however small. She had turned a moment of prejudice into one of connection, proving that sometimes, all it took was a few honest words to change a heart. Marcus watched her go, the soldier who had taught him a lesson he hadn't realized he needed. And as Ava stepped into the terminal, ready to embrace the life she had missed, she carried with her the reminder that kindness, even in the face of misunderstanding, was the greatest strength of all.